On the podcast today we have Jamie Farndale. Jamie debuted for the Scotland Sevens team at the 2015 London Sevens and scored a try in his very first match against Kenya. He was named co-captain of the national team in 2018 and has captained the squad for numerous games since. Jamie was named as co-captain of sustainability for Team Scotland at the Birmingham Commonwealth Games alongside another HIA athlete, Fiona Burnett. He was also announced as Scottish Rugby's Sustainability Ambassador in June 2022. His role there involves helping the organisation reduce carbon emissions and aid World Rugby's push for net zero by 2040. Alongside all of this, he is also studying a master's course on sustainability at Cambridge University. Jamie, welcome to Larger Than Ourselves.
Thank you for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, I do think I nailed that intro. I'm pretty proud of myself for that one. So you represented Scotland in pentathlon as a junior. You were part of the winning choir in the BBC School Choir of the Year competition for 2011, and you're a bagpiper to boot. With the Scottish pop star avenue open to you, why did you end up choosing to pursue a career in rugby?
Yeah, good question. I suppose I never sort of grew up wanting to be a rugby player. I just, at school, just wanted to chuck myself into everything, and that kind of shows on what you're saying there. Various different pursuits, but sort of towards the end of school, I was young for my year, and I played a lot of age grade stuff. So I played for Edinburgh under 16s and then under 18s, and then sort of Scotland national age grade sides, and then had a place to go off and study at uni after school. But because I was a year younger than everyone else, I thought, right, I'll take a gap year, and I got offered this contract with Edinburgh Rugby and thought, this would be great, go and do this for a year. And then the year just went amazingly well. I ended up debuting, I think I'm still maybe youngest to debut for Edinburgh ever. Chris Patterson, who was a Scottish legend, replaced him off the bench. So that whole year just went absolutely crazy, and at the end of it I got rid of the uni course and signed on full time with rugby, and then did some studying part time. But it was that year where I was like, right, no, I absolutely love this is what I want to do. So managed to persuade my parents that I wasn't going to take the uni place.
Amazing.
Which probably took a law degree in itself.
I don't know what it's like in Scotland, but I can't think of any rugby players in my school who were also part of the choir. In my mind, it's sort of like almost opposite ends of the spectrum. Is it different in Scotland, or did you just buck the trend and you did what you loved and that was that?
I think I bucked the trend. It was more just I don't know. I've always had, and the way I've viewed my rugby career as well is to try and get as many experiences and moments and things as possible out of it. I suppose I've had that since I was young, and in school I was just, if there was something that I was able to do, I would sort of go down that path and have a look at, and there's things that I worked out I didn't like, but a lot of things I did really enjoy, and it's just always been exploring different things, I suppose, that's ended up that way.
Amazing.
It sounds a little bit like the curiosity kind of leading the path a little bit. Where do you think that came from?
Yeah, I think maybe it is a sort of curiosity that is naturally there, but it's definitely, and that's what's helped me, I suppose, in my studies as well. I've always, if I read something and I'll try and find out more, and it's definitely a big driver of mine. You're right, curiosity. That's a good way of putting it.
Nice. Just changing text a little bit. So in 2022, it was decided that Ireland, Scotland, and Wales would come together under this broader umbrella of GB for the majority of the Rugby Sevens tournaments. How did that land for you? And I guess having spent so many games wearing the blue jersey for Scotland as a proud Scot and captain no less, was there tension in the team? And I imagine seeing some teammates miss out must have been incredibly difficult.
It was a really tough period, mostly because of the teammates. Going from 3 teams into one, 2/3 of each team obviously ended up without a job, and it was a tough time in rugby. There were a couple of English Premiership clubs that sort of went bust at the same time, so there's a lot of rugby players looking for jobs. So it was a tough time for a lot of Sevens guys to find out that there wasn't a job for them anymore. So it definitely was tough, but the whole thing is exciting. I think the potential that GB7s has is really cool, and that's what's exciting for me. It's all come together very quickly, and I think that period of finding out it was going Scotland Sevens to GB for us happened in a couple of months. We knew the Olympics had mandated that it would have to be a GB team, the same as athletics and hockey. If we're going to compete in the Olympics, they didn't want us coming together a few months before. So we knew from next year it was going to happen, but then it all happened very quickly, sort of a year early, which in hindsight maybe is a good thing, because it's been pretty tumultuous this year. Things have been worked out. We've not quite got a sponsor yet, for example. We're operating on this camp-based system where we train at home and then we come together for week camps and then we go away and compete. So this year, kind of like we're referring to it as year zero. So it's all kind of coming together to make sure that next year we hit the ground running, which definitely will be a good thing. And the long-term potential, like the standard of training already, we come in and it's way up there, and there's pressure and there's intensity, and I absolutely love being a part of it. So the on-field stuff is already going in the right direction, and I think the fact that GB Sevens is its own business almost, so you get countries on the series that are tied into their unions, but now you've got this new GB Sevens that can almost be whatever you want it to be. Where that commercial side excites me as well, and the opportunity of where GB Sevens could end up on the field, off the field. There's this. One of the really exciting parts is that men and women are paid exactly the same, which in rugby is not common at all. So we've got the same goals, we've got the same jobs. It's this, we can make GB Sevens what we want it to be. So there's loads of potential there.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the Sail GP model around creating their own event where they can do their own things and sort of chart their own path, which is great to hear.
Yeah.
And so there was sort of a question that was bubbling around in my head there. Is it relatively even, the amount of players who have come into the GB team from the different nations within?
No, so there's no sort of quota system. It's a performance thing. So I'd say there's slightly more English. There's 2 Welsh, and then be sort of 5 or 6 of us Scots. So one of the important things when it was coming together was that we wanted it to be, as players, we wanted to make sure that it was a performance program, and that was the whole point of this happening was to give Team GB the best chance at the Olympics. So it's down to the coach and his selections.
Yeah, and I could imagine it would be huge having the group as one for the next 18 months leading into Paris 2024. And if it's anything like hockey, those small intricate combinations are just so important to make the breakthroughs and to actually be the difference, I guess, in a game. Is it somewhat similar to that in rugby sevens?
Definitely, absolutely, yeah. And we've already found, even just this season, it was like the first tournament was obviously the only one I can really speak about, but you did find that there were just little bits missing of just understanding of what the guy, with Scotland, you've played with these guys, some of them since you were growing up, and so exactly what they tend to do in certain situations, and the speed that it's come together actually as Team GB has been pretty cool to see, and the way that things are progressing, and that competing with the best teams in the world, you've been chucked in the deep end, and definitely working it out and learning off each other as well is the other cool thing. You've got 3 countries coming together that did things different ways, and it's not theoretical. It's not like, oh, this could work. It's like, no, we did this for years and this worked. This team did this. What's the best for our group? So it's cool learning off each other, learning about each other. It's been a really good year.
My father would call that hybrid vigour, when you pull together different things and get the best learnings from all parts. The other question that came up for me was, has it been difficult adjusting to different leadership? So I assume, if it's a performance-based system to get you into the GB squad, then it's the best performers from each of those camps. And I assume often the best performers will be in leadership roles within their own camps. How did you guys go about electing a leader or a captain, or was that just decided by the coaching staff? Was there any tension there?
So the coach put together a leadership group, and then from that, like, tournament captains are sort of selected.
Per tournament, so you have
tournament.
Okay, interesting.
But I mean, in reality, so Robbie Ferguson has ended up captaining every tournament so far, and he himself is just a brilliant leader. But there are leaders throughout the group, and it's definitely not been. I mean, I hadn't really thought of it until you did this question, but it's worked really well, because I suppose in sevens there's 12 or 13 of you that go away. There's not really any space for any sort of top-down leadership approach.
Right.
Like, everyone has a role, and on the pitch, when there's only 7 of you, you've got to make decisions for yourself. There's no, everyone has a sort of role to play. So I think leadership ends up working in this sort of spaces in between each person, and leadership is almost the purpose and the goal rather than a person, and everyone's sort of working towards that thing. So yeah, I mean, it works really well, because there's so many great leaders in the group, and so many talented players that know the game really well and have played at a high level. So yeah, I think leadership works really well for the group.
That's super interesting, and there must have to be also like a turning down the volume on ego. If you have so many good leaders in a squad, to be able to say, okay, well, maybe I'm not the absolute top of the pile, but if there are a bunch of us who can all do leadership well enough to sort of boost the team as a whole, like that whole sentiment of the rising tide lifts all ships. I'm impressed that there hasn't been any tension, and that it's just been, okay, let's put our heads down and make the squad better. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah. Now, rugby sevens is, it's a really tough sport, and I think the sort of people that end up playing it, I think definitely you're right. That sort of, it's maybe cliche, but that sort of humility. You deal with a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and it teaches you a lot about how to be, I suppose, within the group, and there's that definitely huge respect for each other. So it's a great environment to be in, definitely.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I think one thing from the outside looking in that I've always had a deep amount of respect for is seeing the fitness levels of rugby sevens players. And so I imagine, it's similar in hockey, except I'm about 70 kgs dripping wet, whereas you blokes are carrying around a bit of muscle. But seeing your mates go through that hurt together when you're in training and stuff, I think that does form a real camaraderie.
Definitely, yeah. It's because there's the running fitness, which is one aspect, but then that contact fitness, getting hit, getting down, getting up again, getting off the floor. 40 minutes is a long time, and then you do that 6 times in 2 days. I think there's by the end of a sevens weekend, you're done.
So I've never played rugby sevens. Like Hugo, I'm a beanpole and definitely not built to be hit. But I imagine it's a similar sort of feeling to being in a boxing ring, where if you look at it at face value, 3 minutes is not a long time, but when you're in the ring and trying to punch and avoid getting punched, that 3 minutes is an eternity. And with sevens, there's very, very few breaks. It's like sprint after sprint after sprint, hit after hit, and if you don't get up, then there's a huge gap on the field.
You're also relying on each other. So one of the toughest things in a sevens weekend is, say in game 1 you get a niggle, where you can still play, but it's absolute agony. You've still got 5 games to go. If you then don't play in the next match, then your teammates are down, and subs make such a big difference because it's so intense. So there's so many examples of players that have had some painkillers and strapped up and got through some pretty heroic injuries. The respect levels definitely are high for each other.
So sorry, go ahead, Hugo.
No, you go. I was just going to say, I know the feeling from tournament hockey where, come the end of the tournament, the business time, those subs are just so vital to keep fresh legs on the pitch, and in those crucial moments have the right decision making capability.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious. whether you think there are any gaps in perception between what the public think it's like to be a professional rugby player and what the reality is. I feel like there's been a bit of a theme so far with the athletes that we've spoken to where the public perception of a sport is a lot more glorified and sort of rosy than the reality. And are there any sort of points that stick out to you with regards to professional rugby there?
Yeah, I sort of mentioned before that you get these huge ups and downs in tournament weekends. So, I mean, you can come in from a game and have won and be right up here, and then come in and lose and be right down there, and there's that emotional balance that you have to deal with. But also things like injury. You know, I'm dealing with injury at the moment. There's things like non-selection. There's all these things that are really difficult to deal with. And you fail a lot. Like you're chasing these massive highs, and when you get them, they're amazing. But it comes with all these like massive lows as well, which, you know, again, I mentioned the reason I play sport is for these experiences, for these moments, and I really get so much from those lows as well, because and I really believe this. It's in these extremes that sport give you that you really learn about who you are and learn about yourself. You know, maybe a normal life you could go on an emotional scale from sort of 3 to 7 maybe, but sport just chucks you down to 1 and then up to 10, and you're just left there kind of reeling. And it's like reflecting on those moments that you sort of realise, you learn about yourself, and that's definitely what I'm valuing from and what I'm taking from my sporting career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I've been off a tennis court for a while now. I've been, you know, trying to recover from a knee surgery, and one thing that has stood out to me that I never really recognised when I was on tour was there's a beauty in how much simplicity there is in sport, right? You've got one goal and you know how to get better at it, and you know if you put in X amount of hours a day doing the right things, then you will incrementally get better. And there's that knowledge of when you wake up in the morning, I need to do X, Y, and Z today, and then I'm going to have done a good job today. And the short feedback loop of that is a really, really beautiful thing. And I've completely lost the tie to the 1s and 10s. But Hugo actually has a beautiful thing that he talks about with 1s and 10s in sport as well. And actually, I mean, not to toot our own trumpet too much, but in relation to high impact athletes as well. So Hugo, please save me from my wandering mind.
I do. I love the framing of 1s and 10s. I have used that before as well, because I think it just captures it so well. You know, the roller coaster that is sport. And one thing that helped me with dealing with that, because I'm a pretty emotional character on the field and ride, you know, every game with my heart right out on my sleeve, was actually having this piece of my identity that wasn't wrapped up in sport, that wasn't just about that result on the pitch. And so joining HIA and kind of giving this percentage of my income to something that was not, you know, selfish, it created this more robust mindset on the field where, you know, even on my worst days, I was still doing some good in the world, and on the best days it almost like pulled me a little bit back from that those moments of joy and ecstasy, which was quite grounding. I felt. So would love to, I guess, dive into if you've got any strategies for managing the highs and lows and how you go through that journey.
Just before I forget, I remembered and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget.
Cool.
So what I wanted to say was so you know exactly what you want to do every day. You know how to get better, and you have this really short feedback loop. And so totally agree. Losing sucks. You put so much sunk cost into this career, and you put your whole life towards like trying to succeed in this sport, and then you just keep getting punched in the face. And I think the best lesson that sport teaches is how to deal with failure, because everyone fails in their lives numerous times. In sport, you just have a shorter feedback loop of failing. So it's like, okay, I failed. How did I fail? How can I get better? And you can sort of make those improvements faster. And yeah, it wasn't until I, was off tour and starting to try and focus on some other things that I saw the beauty in that, and the beauty in the simplicity of that. Anyway, I got there.
And knockout tennis must be brutal, because you're always on that way up, and then just failure just knocks you right down. It's the knockout format must be brutal. And
there's one winner per week out of 128 people who enter a tournament, and so everyone else has failed that week, which is that's reality.
Yeah.
But sorry, I derailed. What was the question you asked there, Hugo?
The question was strategies, was it?
Right.
Yeah. How we cope with the highs and lows of competitive sport.
Yeah, definitely something that we kind of worked out as a group was this routine. So we kind of got, because you've got 2 hours in between games, we worked out, if you can come in and do the exact same thing, so have a protein shake, jump in an ice bath, have a shower, review that game, preview the next game, it almost takes the emotion out. And the funny thing is, the good thing is that then, not only because you're emotionally exhausted, if you're doing these ups and downs, not only are you physically exhausted, but you come to game 6, you're emotionally done as well. There's no chance you can compete in a final. But parking these emotions is a really strange thing, and we beat New Zealand actually for the only Scottish team to ever beat a team from New Zealand at any level of the game in history. There was this goal that we had for years and years, and we did it in a quarter-final at London. And we might have come in and celebrated, and this would have been the number one thing we were aiming for, but we came in, we followed the routine, and we went on and won the semi-final, and then beat England in the final at Twickenham. So it ended up being this amazing day. But if we'd let emotion get in the way, it might not have happened. And equally, you come in. I made an awful mistake against Fiji once, to miss out on a quarter-final. Scotland were up, and all I needed to do was score a try. Tackled over the dead ball, and this clip went viral, and all these commentators having their say. But I came in, and my mate handed me a protein shake, and I went through the routine. We went on and beat a team, and ended up getting through to the quarterfinals anyway. So that they're two examples of where this routine takes the emotion out, almost parks it. Like the New Zealand thing, I remember, I physically remember the moment. I was driving somewhere 2 weeks later, and this wave just hit me of what had happened, and it had just been parked. It was really weird, and this wave came over me of wow, that what we did was So it's funny parking these things, and then you then have time to unpack them and learn from them. As you said.
Cool. Didn't you guys come back from 21 zip against New Zealand? Was
that was against South Africa? So that was the year before in the final. So we'd never been past a semi-final. I think we've been to a semi-final twice ever, and we found ourselves in this final against South Africa, and it was at least 2 scores down, and we came back and won in the last minute. That was pretty special as well.
That story about parking the emotion after beating New Zealand and going on to take the title, that's impressive. That's special.
And that's the most special day in my career. Maybe that the New Zealand game was such a big one. Maybe it still would be a special day, but the fact that we went on and did what we did, it definitely sits as good memory.
So should we switch up to some off-field?
Yeah.
So one thing that we talked a little bit about before the call, and would love to tease more out here, is this commitment and energy you have for protecting the environment, and I'm really interested where that passion came from.
I suppose I grew up in nature. Living in Edinburgh, you've got the highlands and the Munros. I spent a lot of time outside growing up, so I suppose that was always there. But the moment things changed for me would be in this. So I did this undergraduate part-time while playing in business, and one of the modules was on business sustainability strategies, and it was just something that made complete sense to me, and the scale of the positive impact that could be made, but also I really saw this and thought, this is the future of business. This is what business has to look like, and there's going to be this transition from how business is done now to this sustainable way of doing business. and I want to be at the forefront of that. I want to, there's maybe that curiosity kicking in. But from that moment, that module, I just read as much as I could around it, and I realised that was what I wanted to do post rugby. I didn't really put sport and sustainability together for a while. I kind of thought, right, I've got my rugby career, I'll finish that, and I suppose I knew I needed a job afterwards which had a drive and a passion. I don't think I could go from being a rugby player to sitting behind a computer screen doing Excel spreadsheets. So I was kind of searching for that drive, and I realised that I found it. It's only more recently that I then put sport and sustainability together and found all these organisations like yourselves and amazing people doing amazing things.
Can you just unpack that idea a little more? You mentioned thinking that this is just how business has to be done in the future. In your mind, what does that look like? Like the ideal way that a business is run?
Yeah, I suppose the caveat to this is I'm still learning, still very much at the beginning. But where I am just now is this, and it's maybe oversimplifying, but I think business has this profits at all cost approach, and that is the root of a lot of these social externalities, inequality, and all these environmental externalities. The environment being degraded and biodiversity loss and species extinction comes from this obsession with financial value, and that's it. And it's almost because that's the simple way of doing business. Like, if all you need to focus on is the bottom line, then it's very easy to make decisions. And I remember actually being taught this. The most easy way to lead in business is to focus on one thing, because then you've got one thing that you're measuring yourself on, and that's that. But what we're realising is that there are all these negative externalities, and things need to be done in a different way. So yeah, it's complexity. It's embracing complexity. And for me, what I'm learning, especially from this master's course, something I'm picking up is that you get resilience from complexity, almost in the same way that nature works. There's so much complexity in how things interact. That's what creates resilience in nature. Whereas if you get rid of and this is biodiversity loss, if you get rid of everything around and have just one point of failure, that's something that is absolutely not resilient. So for me, what business needs to do is to realise that there's far more that we value as society than just finance, just money. Business is there to create well-being. The whole point of a business is to take something and make it into something that creates well-being, that creates happiness and enjoyment and makes our lives better. And actually making more money maybe was a great driver in the past, and capitalism and markets, they have so much power, and they've lifted so many people out of poverty and done so much good. But there's more than just that finance. More money doesn't necessarily mean greater well-being.
Couldn't agree more. And so sorry Hugo, I'm jumping in here, but I wrote this down just before we jumped on. So Jamie, you're remarkable to me in that you've decided to stand up and to speak out about these issues with conviction, about the things that you think are important. And as far as I can tell, this isn't super common in the athlete space. And I think it's a huge shame, but I just wonder if you have any insights into why so few athletes speak up about what they believe in or what they think is important, and maybe if there's anything that we as an industry or as fellow athletes can do to make this more common.
Yeah, I just said before that I kind of had this sustainability in the rugby, and I only sort of put the two together. I never sort of intended on speaking out and doing everything that I've done, but I'm so glad that I did, and I have and continue to do. It's difficult, that first step, of speaking out about it. There's definitely things that you're worried about. There's hypocrisy. You're worried about your own life. As soon as the worst thing you can be seen as is someone that's sort of preaching about how things need to be done, and I hope I would never come across in that way. But that's a worry, because then people start to look at your life and what you're doing. So that there's definitely a hypocrisy piece that you need to think about. Not knowing enough as well. And as I said, I'm very much still at the beginning and trying to learn as much as I can still, and very aware that no one in the world has all the answers. Certainly I don't have all the answers. So there's a lot. It's to be speaking publicly. It's very easy to speak publicly about your sport because you know it well, and it's something that you've done every day. But to speak about something that is by nature probably the most complex problem that we're solving as humanity is very difficult to do. In terms of ways to get more athletes to speak, I think athletes like yourself that are already taking a stance, I think it's going to take the people that are especially driven to take the first steps, and I think that makes it easier for other athletes to do the same. So that sort of ambassadorial athlete definitely does help. I've been asked the question before whether that's the right way or whether we should be encouraging more athletes to speak. I think authenticity is key at this stage, and you need those authentic athletes speaking in the right way, and that's how you generate momentum. But just understanding that as an athlete, you don't have to know all the science. You don't have to completely understand. As long as you speak authentically about what you believe, then that's all that we're asking for, really.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I just agree with Marcus's comment earlier. What I find so impressive is your ability to walk across this climate landscape, which is just getting more and more complex, and there's so much emotion as well at the moment in the climate arena, where the media sort of buys into that, and so sometimes having the ability to walk in those waters is really difficult. And so I've just been really impressed to see you conduct yourself in that arena.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So here's a self-serving question. What drew you to High Impact Athletes?
Hugo, just speaking to Hugo, was because I'd sort of been giving a bit to environmental charity before, and Hugo picked up and talked about this, giving in the most efficient way or the most effective way, which I'd never really thought about, and just made so much sense. It's such a great way of thinking about it, and I remember the way you put it was really good, Hugo. You talked about your finance background and applying that to charities, and it really struck me, and I thought everything made complete sense, and
I was
well done, Hugo.
I was exactly the same though. It's so funny when everything in my life, I'm using like some sort of comparative analysis for, like if I buy a coffee, I'll look at like 6 cafes on Google reviews and do my analysis and see which one has the best latte art, and we'll select that one. Whereas when I was giving to charity in the past, it was just kind of ad hoc and like, oh, that sounds like a good thing to do, so I'll make a donation with no kind of assessment of the outcome. And so I think actually applying that finance lens and looking at, hey, where's this money going, or what's the comparative analysis of $1 here versus $1 here, and finding those kind of levers was a game changer for me. So it's nice to hear that.
It's also a sporting lens as well, right? I mean, Jamie, at the moment you're in a camp where you're doing so much analysis of how can I get the most out of my body over the next 2 weeks, and that's optimizing your time for improvement. And in exactly the same way, like, why not optimize the good that we can do in the world? If we're going to try to do good, why not do the optimal good? And I think it probably hit all of us in the same way. Like, of course that makes sense. Why didn't I think this way before? But for some weird reason in the charity space, it's not common to think that surgically about it, or that sort of analytically about things, where things are more driven by the heart. And that's a really important piece, because the heart is what drives us to do good. But then having a bit of that brain sort of across it and directing it, I think is is just as important, if not perhaps even more important.
Yeah.
How do you want to be remembered, Jamie?
I think I want to be remembered as creating positive impact with the platform that I've got. So yeah, using the situation I'm in to the best of its ability, I think.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, it sounds like you're on the absolute right journey now, bringing those, the learning from the sustainability side and the lived experience from the sporting side together.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that I've ended up in this space. Like you guys know, there's so many amazing people doing amazing things. It's a really exciting place to be in.
Off the top of your head, this is probably quite a difficult question, but what is the kindest thing that someone's ever done for you?
The kindest thing, I think kindness is everywhere. I mean, you see kindness in people. My fiance is probably the most kind person that I know. In terms of examples, it's tough to pin down a thing. I mean, as a sportsman, my parents, with me growing up, they would drive me just about every night, and as you said, also with all the different activities that I did, they'd spend their lives in cars waiting outside things for me to be done. I mean, there's a lot of kindness there.
5 different arenas there.
No, I think kindness is everywhere, and that's what we've got to celebrate the most. Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay, should we jump into a few quickfire questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so the questions are quickfire. Answers don't have to be. The floor is yours. Take as long or as short as you'd like. What are the best and worst things about humanity? Or if you had to pick the one best and the one worst thing about humanity, what would you pick?
The best thing, probably along that theme, is kindness. And with this business lens, I do think that there is kindness in business. There's this narrative that I spoke about of profit at all costs, but within that there are people, and you often find that people within business do the right thing. Something comes across their desk and it seems right, so they do it. So within that sort of corporate drive towards profits, that there are good people and kindness. Maybe the worst thing, again with this lens, would be that sort of corporate drive, and when business, like, you almost lose people's own sense of kindness, because business is the goal of the business is finance, and all these negative externalities, inequality, environmental degradation, almost get forgotten, and it's not a human thing. It's almost that the business it's its own drive that's doing that. So I suppose that they're I'd say they're the best and worst things with that business lens.
I love that concept of, within this drive for profits, there are people, and people have the capacity to stop and say, hold on, is this right or not? I hadn't thought about it that way before. That's really good.
What are the 3 biggest things that define you?
Hard work's definitely the main one. I pin a lot on that, just effort. I think emotional intelligence, I'd like to think, would be another. Looking out for those around me, and especially in that sort of team environment, trying to get the best out of everyone. Third one.
Can I offer something?
Yeah, go for it. Help me out.
So you and I haven't met before recording this podcast, but a word that jumps out for me is integrity. I feel like you've thought about your values, and you're being very careful and very very true in living them, and to me that speaks integrity.
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate that. Thanks.
I mean, you're welcome to shoot me down and say no, that's no.
No, definitely no. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the hard work one just shines through as well. Like, being a professional athlete's tough enough, and it can consume your life and life outside of your sport as well. But to kind of be pulling all these other threads alongside that, it just shines through to me that you're a guy who gets up every day and tries to get the most out of each one. So it's pretty cool to see.
Who would you most like to see become a high impact athlete?
Good question. And because the what's sort of jumping into my head is someone that's really followed a LeBron or a Messi, but I don't think that's the answer. I think, like I mentioned before, that the authenticity is key. So it's not an answer, but I think I would say it would have to be an athlete that was authentically driven in the right way and doing this for the right purposes, rather than, oh, he's got lots of followers, he should speak about the climate because it's important, because then it's not real. I think that authenticity in speaking because it's something you really believe in. If a LeBron or a Messi, does really care about the environment and speaks about it, then great, that is the greatest impact we can have. I think for a high impact athlete, you want someone that authentically cares about the charities or the areas that this community represents. So yeah, not an answer, but an authentic athlete.
There's an interesting sort of paradox there in my mind where I agree with you, like instinctively I agree with you that I would far prefer someone who's engaged with the ideas and believes in the mission. At the same time, if someone like a Messi who didn't fully believe in the ideas but decided to just speak out about it a little bit, if through Messi speaking out he got 100,000 other people to start thinking about this stuff versus, let's say, the 1,000 from the person who's really engaged, in my mind it's like, does it then matter? Like, how important is that that full athlete engagement at the bottom line? And that feels a little bit sort of crass or unfeeling or something, but yeah.
No, I do agree with you. Yeah, no, it's a good point. And a lot of this messaging around social, environmental issues quite often comes from governments, from the UN, and it's sort of faceless. Whereas having someone like a Messi, it's human, isn't it? And I suppose it's a good point. It's something maybe to get into a bit more, but whether authenticity matters, that's got me thinking. But yeah, if Messi was to deliver the same messages coming from a human, and maybe the human part is more important than the authentic part. There's definitely both needed, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, it's like if what we care about is impact and positive change in the world, then maybe we have to. It gets to a slippery slope then, right? Like,
it does, yeah. But no, it's interesting.
The ends don't always justify the means.
I was thinking you're sounding a little bit like businesses and their profit drivers, but I do get the point, and I think it's a complex landscape as well, and the authenticity. It's a tricky word to say. Piece adds value to the impact piece, so it's almost a multiplier rather than a plus.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And yeah, if you do have a contact for Messi, then please do feel free to pass that on. Are there any questions that we should have asked you that we haven't?
Not that I can think of. No, there's been loads talked about in this. This has been great.
One that's just jumped into my head that we did sort of, I think you touched on it, Jamie, if you've got another 5 minutes to chat, was this idea of balancing environmental drivers and like the progress in a sense. Because, let me start again, phrase that terribly. Yeah, so one of the things that I'm thinking a lot about now with my Giving to Clean Air Task Force is that providing these solutions that are going to help the global south be more energy abundant so able to live in better conditions is a real priority of mine at the moment, and I see it as so intertwined between the climate and the global health and poverty portfolio, and I'd be really interested in your take on that and any maybe pushback or just what you're thinking in that space.
Definitely, it comes back to that point about complexity and looking at something like the Sustainable Development Goals. What you quickly realise is how interrelated everything is, and it's not just pursuing one goal. There's so many positive knock-on effects, but also negative knock-on effects as well. And it's just this massive system, and it's sort of systems thinking. Daniell Meadows sort of talks about this systems thinking, where you have to consider everything and how everything interacts with everything, and that's where the just sort of mind-boggling complexity comes in. You can't just pursue clean energy without having a knock-on effect to everything. So it's really difficult, and you can try and map it and sort of draw systems maps, but it takes a lot of thinking outside of the box, which is where that point about the way business is done, it's so easy just to go profits and that's it, that's all we're focused on. It's much more difficult to be more open to this complexity and look around you and look at that whole system, that system as a whole. I think her levers of impact or places to intervene in a system where it's kind of mindsets and goals of the system as being the number 1 and 2 drivers of system change, rather than focusing on inputs or the kind of constants or parameters. Understanding it and where you're best to intervene and how that is going to affect the rest of the system.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for giving us your time. I caught flashes. I think you might be wearing a beautiful T-shirt there. Is that?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there it is.
That'll be appropriate.
Nice. I think that's either the muscliest or tied for first muscliest HIAT I've seen. There's an NFL running back, Patrick Laird, who fills it out pretty well too. But anyway, thank you so much for taking the time. Also, huge amount of respect for what you're doing in the climate space, for standing up, speaking out. I have a lot of admiration for you and the conviction that you have and the eloquence that you have in speaking out about this stuff. Thanks also for being part of the High Impact Athletes team. I guess the last question from our side is, how can people follow you? How can people keep up with what you're doing?
Just on social media, Instagram is Farndale J, and the same on Twitter. But no, thank you for first for having me on, but also for all the work that you guys do. It's an amazing community that you've created of these sort of purpose-driven athletes, and I'm really excited about this podcast and all the people that you're going to speak to. Thanks for having me on.
one bonus question from there: is there someone who jumps out as a person we should speak to next on the podcast? Someone who you think might be a really good chat? Doesn't have to be a high impact athlete, just someone.
Yeah, someone who would be really good, and from sort of being in this academic sports sustainability space, Maddie Orr is sort of the big name in there. She'd be great to speak to.
Okay, nice. Actually, I think I might have. She does quite a lot of research on sport and voice, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, we'll have to get her on. Again, Jamie, thank you so much for what you do. Thanks for coming on the show. Really enjoyed chatting with you.
Cheers. Thanks,
mate.